This short webinar will cover communication models, which can be found in Chapter 1 of your textbook, Communication Principles for a Lifetime. I have a couple of important notes about communication models before we get started. Is that one, it is one of the foundational elements of understanding how we communicate with one another. So it's really fitting for being in the first chapter, as it's something you'll build upon and can reincorporate as you read the additional chapters in the book. Secondly, it's important to know that these models are not necessarily different from one another, but they essentially have the same components and build upon one another. So when you're learning about these models, it's important to understand the different components first so that you're able to discern how these models progress as you get more complex in your view of communication interactions. So to start off, the basic model is the communication as action model. This is a one-way linear model. There's a clear source and a clear receiver in this model. The source is essentially the person that encodes meaning into a message. Encodes just means that the source is putting meaning into that message. They're actually coming up with that message, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, and have placed their meaning when they send that message to the receiver. On the other end, the receiver decodes that message, and by decodes, it just means that he or she interprets or takes the meaning out of the message. So that receiver, all we know in this particular model is that he or she has received the message. We don't know anything past that. So when you're looking at communication as action, you know that it's more source oriented. We're looking at how the source has put meaning into that message and sent it, and we know the receiver has received that message, but we don't know much more past that. A couple of other important elements of this particular model is the message itself, which is basically just a verbal or nonverbal representation of whatever the individual has wanted to send to the receiver. It can also be written, so if you were to send an actual message in the mail, that would be a written form of communication that also falls under this model. So the message is going to be sent through a channel, and that channel can be, again, verbal or nonverbal in nature. It is actually the vehicle through which the message is sent. In mediated context, it's easy to identify the channel because essentially it's what the message is being sent through. So email, text message, instant messaging, all of those are channels through which we send our messages. If we're in a face-to-face setting, we know that the channel is going to be the context of the message. So is it a verbal message? Is it nonverbal? Is the message sent through our senses? Is the audibility of it can all be considered as part of the channel. So the channel, again, is just the vehicle through which the message is sent from the source to the receiver. At any point in this particular model, we can come up with noise. So noise is essentially anything that can get in the way of the message being sent from the sender to the receiver. There are two types of noise that are important for you to note. There's the physical noise, which is any type of noise that is audible or external. So this is noise that comes from outside aspects that can inhibit the message. An important thing also to note is that noise can come in at any point in the model. It can come in on the sender's end, it can come in on the receiver's end, it can also come in and interrupt the channel. So physical noise is, again, that outside or external noise that can come in and inhibit the message from being effectively relayed. So on the sender's end, a sender could have physical noise like people around him or her talking, horns honking, loud objects that are falling or going overhead like a airplane. If you're in the car, there's a lot of noise that will be surrounding you that is, again, audible. It can also be affecting or have an effect on the receiver. So physical noise that has an effect on the receiver can be the same types of noise, but it inhibits the message from being effectively received or decoded. So it will be hard for that individual to interpret or comprehend the message in the correct manner. So again, physical noise is anything that is external that is inhibiting the message from being sent or received. On the other hand, there's psychological noise that is any type of internally driven derived noise. So this can be thoughts or feelings. Sometimes we can be really preoccupied with maybe things that we need to do in our day, and so we're not focused on the message at hand. So this again can affect the sender by maybe not sending a very accurate message, and it can affect the receiver by not interpreting the message effectively. Again, because their mind is preoccupied with other things. So daydreaming, multitasking, any of that can affect psychological noise. Psychological noise can also affect a feeling or be affected by a feeling. So if you're, for instance, really angry about something, your heightened level of anger will get in the way from the message being effectively sent or received. The same thing with fatigue, for instance, which is not quite a feeling, but it's a physiological aspect of you that can affect the message from being sent or received. So I know many times in the past when I've been really tired, it's difficult for me to maybe articulate my messages effectively, and for the same matter, interpret messages very effectively. So again, noise can affect either end of the model, the sender or the receiver. It can also affect, like I said, the channel in which the message is sent. One good example of the channel being affected is perhaps if you are sending an email, for instance, to somebody else, that message might be interrupted because your internet is out. That is a type of noise that comes in and interrupts the message from being effectively sent from the sender to the receiver. So going to the next model, again, we're building upon the communication as action model. The communication as interaction model is also considered a linear model. It's just going in two opposite directions. So the source is sending a message to the receiver, as we saw in the first model. However, we have the receiver who's sending some sort of feedback to the source, and that is a response message going from the receiver to the source. This again can be verbal or nonverbal. It can confirm the source's message. It can restate the source's message. It can be any sort of, again, response to the source's message. So nonverbal forms of this could be a head nod or eye contact to show that they have understood or listened to the message. It can also be verbal, asking for clarification could be a type of feedback. Sending a response to a question could be a type of feedback as well. And again, so this is not only considering the source's orientation to the message, which the source sent that original message, but it also considers the receiver's end. So we know that the receiver not only received the message and decoded it, but he or she also sent some sort of response back to the source. So if you look at just the middle part of this model, it's identical to the communication as action model. So two important components that you want to make sure you remember when thinking about the communication as interaction model are feedback and context. So feedback is essentially, like I mentioned, just the receiver's response to that message. Context, on the other hand, is the environment or setting in which the interaction has occurred. So context can be physical in that it is where you actually are having that interaction. So the context could be something that's informal, like a social context where you might be talking with friends at your house. It could also be more of a formal type of context, such as if you were interacting with a colleague at work. So that actual environment or setting is going to have some sort of impact or influence on how the communication occurs within that interaction. So again, environment in actual physical settings can be one aspect that you look at. You can also look at more psychological settings or relational settings that this interaction occurs. So you could talk about perhaps how the length of the relationship has an impact on the interaction between the source and the receiver. For a really long-standing relationship, you know that you will have that past experience to draw from. you'll be able to maybe know how that person has interacted with you in the past, and that will shape how you interact with this person in this current interaction. So, that relational context also has an impact on how the interaction will occur. The last model is a communication as transaction model. This model is the most complex out of all three. Instead of having a linear relationship between the two, this type of transaction is more simultaneous. So both individuals serve as source and receiver. There's no clear source and there's no clear receiver, so they both have input and are taking output from that particular interaction. As you can see in the middle, it's two-way, so the message and feedback is simultaneously occurring. So while one person is sending a message, there could be simultaneous feedback coming from the other individual. I listed interpersonal communication, or dyads, which are essentially just two people, there by the side is because this is probably most fitting for relationship or understanding relationship development. So it's really clear to see how both individuals are equally inputting into the conversation or interaction, and that they are also gaining information from one another at the same time. So as you can see, there's still the same components from before, including context and noise. It's just listed in a different manner, or placed in a different manner. So again, most importantly with this particular model is that you remember the word simultaneous. Both interactants are talking or communicating with one another in verbal and nonverbal manners to be able to increase the relationship depth, or perhaps help understand one another so that the relationship develops further. So to sum up, I want to provide you with a couple of questions so that you can test yourself. I'll shortly pause after I read the question and possible responses so that you can also pause on your computer so you can answer it. And then I will give the question right after. So the first question is, Alex is listening to Leah tell a story about what happened in class yesterday. The two are engaging in which actions? A, they are both encoding. B, Leah is encoding while Alex is decoding. C, Alex is decoding while Leah is encoding. Or D, they are both decoding. The correct answer is B. So in this particular instance, Leah is encoding because she's the one who is telling the story. She's putting meaning into that message. Alex, on the other hand, is decoding because he's listening. He's interpreting that message. As we will talk about again in the next question, this is particularly important for understanding the communication as action model. There's a clear source and a clear receiver. We know that the receiver has received the message and has decoded it, but we don't know much past that. Question 2. On the day Janet was scheduled to give her speech, her class was relocated into an auditorium. Janet couldn't quite overcome the feeling of isolation she felt as she spoke to her 20 classmates in a room that could seat 500. Which of the following elements is most responsible for Janet's reaction? A, feedback, B, context, C, information source, or D, channel? The correct response is B, context. So the actual auditorium is a context change for Janet. We know that she was scheduled to give her speech in a regular sized classroom, which is also physical context. And because she was relocated, that affected the way that she felt in her confidence and trying to give that speech. So a lot of this might have to do with how she's able to engage with her audience. So that context obviously had effect on the way that she was able to communicate with her peers. Question 3. The model of communication referred to as human communication as action may be summarized with the phrase: A, communication takes place when messages are sent and received. B, communication takes place when messages are exchanged. C, communication takes place when meanings are created and exchanged. Or D, communication takes place when human beings are affected by each other. The correct answer is A. So communication takes place when messages are sent and received. This is critical of the human communication as action model. Remember, as I mentioned a moment ago with the first scenario, that the message was sent, and we know that it was received by the receiver, but we don't know much past that. So we just know that this particular model is just about sending and receiving messages. We don't know more than that. If we had heard something about feedback, for instance, then we would know that that would go into the second model, communication as interaction. Question 4. Jenny is speaking to Liz about her ideas for a speech. While Jenny is speaking, Liz simultaneously shakes her head and has a puzzled look on her face. Jenny notices this response and stops and explains her ideas in another way. This example is closely related to which model of communication? A, communication as action, B, communication as feedback, C, communication as interaction, and D, communication as transaction. The correct answer is D, communication as transaction. So in this particular scenario, we see that both individuals are simultaneously sending messages and feedback. So again, the key word here, simultaneously. Jenny is speaking, and as she's speaking, Liz is sending nonverbal cues that are letting Jenny know that she's confused. So Jenny then shifts the way that she is sending her messages and tries to explain her ideas in a different way. So there's a lot going on in this short scenario that allows us to see the complexity of communication in this interaction. So it would definitely support, again, the communication as transaction model. I hope this short webinar was helpful for you. This is definitely one of the most important aspects of understanding communication behaviors between individuals. So if you do have any additional questions about the communication models, please contact one of either your assigned course mentor, or you can always email the inbox at com@wgu.edu, or give us a call at 1-877-435-7948, extension 3371.